Hello. I recommend grabbing a cup of tea because this is going to take a while. We're going to sit down and we're going to talk about Breadtube. My original plan was to react to a bit of the Cabernacle's recent video about Breadtube, which tackled sort of the controversy that led to this current moment. Essentially, ContraPoints, you know her, you may love her, was on Twitter arguing with people, not super new, particularly arguing with Taylor Lorenz, and was making certain points that, about the thing going on. I'm not trying to say certain words within the first minute because you know how YouTube is. About recent politics, when it comes to the United States and what we're funding in the Middle East. You guys know my position on this, right? Just to be clear, you've seen my other work. Okay, the first minute has passed. I think I'm okay to start using the actual terms now. So Taylor Lorenz and ContraPoints were having a back and forth, and essentially ContraPoints hammered home certain things she's been emphasizing about Palestine and the genocide in Palestine, in Gaza, to emphasize sort of anti-Semitism as a problem on the left. She also used a death toll figure that is widely repudiated and outdated at this point, but is sort of an official death toll that is like 60,000. We know that it's much more likely to be well over 100,000 at this point. I had a lot of things listed that I was going to say, or at least some bullet points. I was going to talk about my previous history, my interactions with ContraPoints, as well as PhilosophyTube in the past as a journalist. I was going to talk about how I viewed them growing up, in terms of when I was in college a few years ago, what their videos did, the impact that they had, and my disappointment with Breadtube as a movement, my disappointment with what became of it. Let me have the chat pop up really quickly. I was going to talk about my disappointment with what it came of Breadtube because it seemed to just emphasize parasociality and loving on these lovable white folks instead of political organizing and political education. I felt like an opportunity was lost, but I still retained a lot of like favorable sentiment to those creators. I was going to talk about my disappointment that these large creators who got their start as breakout creators in the late 2010s, talking about essentially left-wing politics, debunking fascist politics, debunking online right-wing narratives, and de-radicalizing tons of people to become less and less right-wing, like de-blackpilling them away from right-wing talking points and opening up their world to completely different politics that could be about liberation, that could be about equality, that could be about anti-capitalism and like the effects that has on us and what we can do about it. I thought that was going to be the case for my presentation, but then I realized as I sat down here to prepare for this stream, which I'm doing, by the way, because I'm currently on kind of a break and I'm needing to just do less edited, copy, paste, cut well content. I realized that she made a statement. She made a statement through Reddit, as well as Instagram, fully cementing what her point of view is on the genocide in Gaza. And man, it's not very good. And I feel like a lot of people are coming to these conclusions, but it's time that we have this conversation officially. Breadtube is a disappointment. It was a disappointment. It no longer is. And the YouTube that is emerging from the ashes of Breadtube and its influence is better. It's more creators from more diverse backgrounds from all over the world who are far more principled in the kind of content that they put out and how they engage with their audience. We need to acknowledge that and make a decision and make a decision about what we're going to do about it next as creators and as audiences. And part of how we're going to do that is by examining what content creators are doing with far less of a resourceful position than someone like ContraPoints. We're going to shed light on content creators who deserve the love that people like ContraPoints, H-Bomb, PhilosophyTube have been getting. We're going to talk about creator responsibility and what are reasonable demands that audiences can make of not only content creators, but public figures in general, with what we're seeing now, with what we're seeing in terms of what politicians are succeeding running on in New York City, what artists are doing at Glastonbury. We're going to talk about what are reasonable demands that are, that we should be making. How has that shifted? How has that changed in ways that a lot of people are not recognizing? What is this new era that we're stepping into? And how can we facilitate the kind of change that we want in these spaces with a small impact that we can have? At some point, we're going to look for a little bit of tea at the numbers that folks have to get you a sense of just how much financial benefit, material benefit, hi April, these folks have gotten to contextualize the kind of position that they're taking, and compare that with my experience and the experience of other content creators. But the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to read this statement. I know a lot of y'all came to see that. A lot of people were talking about it in the chat. Are you going to talk about it? Are you going to talk about it? Yes, we're going to read the ContraPoints statement. Hopefully I set this up correctly. Okay. Do not mind the things that I have on the side there. Okay, I haven't shown any of my public information too much, just my Reddit account. I don't use it, so don't come at me. I'm getting text messages from somebody. Tough timing. I gotta go on Do Not Disturb. Okay, let's read it and let's talk about what the problem is with it. Okay, I'm gonna move my webcam as well. I'm sorry for being so deliberating so much about this in terms of setting this up. Okay, so she starts here by saying she's going to post this to Reddit instead of Twitter, and hopefully to minimize fragments being clipped out of context. Sincerest apologies to the mods. Okay, so the first line already I have a problem with. So, many leftists feel betrayed because I haven't made a video on Palestine. I already have a problem with this framing. I already think it's kind of a straw man. I don't know if it's necessarily completely untrue. There are leftists, and this is a point we'll come back to. There are people online who make unreasonable demands of creators, especially creators who do not get the kind of income that someone like ContraPoints does, if we're being frank here. But yeah, it's not exactly reasonable to ask people to center all of their art and all of their work towards repeating, trying to do specific types of work. It's not reasonable, not because it's not a noble thing to ask, not because it's not something we should really reward people for doing. For instance, somebody like Noah Samson changing his content to be so primarily about Palestine is a very commendable thing. The stream that he did for Palestine is very commendable. But it's unreasonable because everybody has their place, right? Everybody has their gift, everybody has their talent, everybody has their place. Everybody has things that they deal with in real life. Everybody has their own schedule. Not everybody has the same support networks. A lot of people have very real personal concerns and also have to try to contribute something a little bit different from other people because we're all a little bit different, right? So I can't quite do what Noah Samson does. And we're going to talk a little bit about what people can do, how they can figure out what they can do from their position. But, I love, Noah Samson's a friend of mine. I love what he's doing. And no, it's not reasonable for maybe the 5 people who have asked ContraPoints to do the same thing. It's not reasonable for them to do that. But I do think that this is a rhetorical tactic that a lot of people use. It's a rhetorical tactic that a lot of people use to avoid engaging with legitimate critique by centering the most unreasonable version of it. I'll repeat that. People do not engage with the most reasonable critiques of them by instead censoring the most unreasonable ones. And this is understandable to a degree, because the internet is hard. Being a public figure is really hard. It's really difficult. Now that I have a couple of years of experience with that, it's really hard. We see a lot of people, being super mean and super, like, it's hard to get death threats. I just had to report some stuff I saw on Twitter the other day because some dude was just going in on me. Of course, Twitter hasn't done anything about it, thanks to that app. But it's hard. And the natural proclivity, a lot of the times, especially when you haven't had the most easy life, is to go defensive mode. And to say, these people are unreasonable, I'm being asked to do too much, I gotta stop. That said, it's really bad, especially when your job, your strength, what people look to you for is reasonable discourse, is being discursively strong, is being an intellectual, right? And you get paid handsomely for it. We're gonna get into it. To then be this like coy about, I'm not gonna engage, I'm actually just gonna engage with the people who are saying the most unreasonable things and characterize that argument entirely that way instead of engaging with people who have more reasonable points, right? That said, let's keep reading the thing because I could go in all day. Leftists feel betrayed because I haven't made a video on Palestine. Do they actually want a ContraPoints video about Palestine? Will they be happy if I get in the bath and pour milk in a mannequin of Benjamin Netanyahu? No. So again, like, we're emphasizing, will my audience be happy about what I do instead of what can I do to help other people? Let me repeat that. We're emphasizing, will people online be happy with what I do instead of what can I do to help people? This is what we're focusing on. This is how we start off the page. And frankly, it's disappointing because nobody will ever have 100% positive response. I know it's hard for ContraPoints as a trans woman. I know she's experienced a lot of really unfair critique, a lot of negative talk online, let's say, a lot of death threats, things like that. These things are really hard to deal with. But why is that the focus? And again, like, we're gonna get into it. When you have this position, you have this resource, and this is your job, why is your focus, oh, people are going to be mean to me, and not, this is what I can do to raise a lot of money for Palestine. This is what I can do to bring people some education that maybe they're not privy to. Since I have this time, since I'm being put in this position to do this work, I should focus on doing the best job I can do. And maybe that is for her the idea of how to do the best job she can do, is how can I satisfy my audience? But that's not what political commentary should be. That's not what social commentary should be. That's not what writers and artists should do. Our job is to challenge opinion. Our job is to shift discourse. And you're going to see a lot of what she's talking about here is premised on viewing her work and viewing everybody who has a public platform's work as to be making compromises so that audiences look at you favorably, and so that you can like have the largest audience you can, essentially, and not challenging people's opinions, challenging people intellectually. And you can do this. I try to do this without being mean, okay? But that's supposed to be my job. Like, I get paid to do that. That's why people like my stuff. I have posted about Gaza occasionally, and I have quietly given money to Palestinian aid organizations. So quietly is like one of these things, people make these points a lot about, you don't know what people are doing behind the scenes. You know, you're saying ContraPoints should do more. You're saying Tom York should do more. This is getting compared to Tom York of Radiohead a lot. I talked about him in a video for my second channel. By the way, this is going to be a VOD on the second channel. I'll post it on community posts. You don't know what they're doing behind the scenes. They could be quietly, privately doing their work. Okay, but your job is being a public figure. You direct tons of people's attention, millions of views per video, to intellectually challenging people to see their world in a better way, to help other people, right? To challenge themselves to become better people, to be better actors in society, to think more politically and more educated, all of that. Why do certain things quietly and emphasize how important it is that you do it quietly if your job is to be loud? Your job is to be loud, okay? I understand there are certain things you have to do quietly. I do certain things quietly. I don't post every donation that I make to a trans person or to a specific mutual aid on community posts, because some things are just private. Some things you just do out of the goodness of your heart, quote unquote, to try to keep yourself, morally in the right place. But some things you project to the crowd. Some things you proclaim because that's your job. I haven't been reading anything in the chat really, but hello to everybody. I see that there's a lot of folks in here. I will engage with the chat more soon, but thanks for coming. I have posted about Gaza occasionally and have quietly given money to Palestinian aid organizations, but I think what leftists really want is for me to join their chorus of anger. They sense some hesitation on my part and are judging me very harshly on my presumed opinions. I'd rather be judged on my actual opinions. So here they are. And you know what? This makes my job a lot easier. So thank you for putting your actual opinions there, right? Thank you for putting your actual opinions forward. The thing about the chorus of anger, I want leftists, I think leftists want me to join their chorus of anger. You're going to see that this is kind of this very demeaning thing. This very demeaning way that ContraPoints views activism work online, education work online, as just like a chorus of anger, right? And you're gonna see her making certain presumptions and assumptions about the inefficacy of this work, which we will debunk afterward. So here are her opinions, right? Is Israel committing genocide in Gaza? Yes. Do I oppose it? Yes. Do I feel angry about it? Yes. I also feel a lot of other things. Okay, so her position, her opinion is that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. And she opposes it. So it's interesting because when we talk about doing certain things, right? Remember when people were like, do you condemn Hamas? Do you condemn XYZ? Do you condone XY? Do you condone the murder of da-da-da? And talking to just regular people about whether they condemn or condone something, whether they oppose something. Opposing is an action. Opposing is not a belief. Opposition is an action. Right? When somebody is called the ops, and that's a reference to them being an active threat to somebody, right? Opposition is who you play on a basketball court. It's not people who think differently from you, right? Opposing a genocide is something regarding action. It's something regarding not just you thinking it's bad, but you doing something to stop it. And so far in this post, we're seeing ContraPoints have a lot more emphasis towards her audience's opinion of her and regular random people on the internet's opinion of her, instead of what can I do to actionably back the things that I think, because I think this is a genocide, which yes, it's accurate. There's just no, if this is not a genocide, there's just no meaningful use of the word, right? So that's correct. It's good that she thinks that. I don't know why she has to say she opposes it, because obviously she knows if it's a genocide, it's bad. But this is the thing. She's setting herself up to look like I'm on the side of against genocide. I'm opposed to genocide. I'm one of the people fighting against genocide. But wait, are you or are you not? Because if you're fighting against genocide, that implies action. But when you subtly say that you oppose something simply because of your opinion about it, you do this kind of mind fuck on people to make them say, "Oh, you're fighting this thing," right? When you're not actually necessarily fighting it. And that's not to say that ContraPoints has done nothing. Obviously, she has tweeted certain things, posted probably a couple of links. But the central critique that I'm going to make is that she could do a lot more, should do a lot more. What's up, Colormine? What's up, Selena Flows? She could do a lot more and doesn't. And I'm going to make that as reasonable of a thing as possible, okay? I'm going to try to make that point as reasonably as possible is what I mean. Okay, so here are her other things that she feels. One, doom. She feels doom. I could go on and on about this, right? Just about every single part of this post, but it's so fitting that she's like, here's the other things that I feel, to say like, hey, reasonably, like I feel anger, but I also feel other things, and these things are reasonable. And the first thing is doom. The first thing is doom. I just want y'all to sit with that. I'm not going to get into it too much, but I just want you to sit with what happens when you are centering your feelings of doom. What kind of person does that make you, right? How effective does that make you at helping people when you are feeling doom, when you are a doomer, right? The week after October 7th, it was clear the mood among Israeli leaders and civilians was overwhelmingly kill or be killed existential panic and unstoppable lust for revenge. It reminded me of the US after 9/11. There was no reasoning or protesting them out of it, nor was it politically feasible for the US to withdraw aid to Israel on a time frame that would make a difference. So history suggests that this is incorrect. Okay? First and foremost, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to easily dig up reporting right in front of y'all, but I would like you to look things up so that we can kind of community cite things. Hi, Babila. We can kind of community cite things. Look up how Israeli officials were surprised by Biden. They were surprised by how much aid Biden gave them, what they expected Biden to give them in aid versus what he gave them. Because there was reporting that Israeli officials were expecting this to be a short response that the US would eventually cut off. The second point that I'm going to make, and you'll see this if you watch the sort of latter half of my Biden video, Biden.mp4, you will see that I talk about a historical examples of US presidents using their executive power and their position to stop Israeli officials from committing further violence in Palestine. George W. Bush did it. Ronald Reagan did it. And there was, there's a whole story of a meeting that Joe Biden had with, I'm forgetting the name of which Israeli official it was, but this was in the 80s. It was the Israeli president at the time, Menachem Begin. And Menachem Begin, the president of Israel, hardcore Zionist, was taken aback by how violent Joe Biden's rhetoric was in terms of attacking Palestinians post a particular conflict. You're talking about literally the president of Israel, literally like heads of state in Israel that are like, yo, this Joe Biden guy is even more violent than we are. And fast forward decades, we see Joe Biden and Israeli officials saying, wow, we are shocked that he just kept this going. We thought he was just going to give us a couple of weeks where we could just bomb indiscriminately and then start just tamping down on it like other US presidents have done. So, and I want you to pay attention. I want you to just write those things down, look them up, back me up. If I'm incorrect, I'm incorrect. If I'm lying, I'm flying. But I want you to take stock of this once you see what I'm talking about. These are folks like ContraPoints who position themselves as the rabble is so uneducated. The rabble is so uninformed. The rabble is so incorrect. These people online, these masses, they're just a chorus of anger. They don't think reasonably. They don't think about the facts. And then when it's time for them to say, what are your opinions? What are the facts? They are very provably incorrect. Very provably incorrect. They are way less informed than many of the online leftists that they say are not informed. And that's just the reality for a lot of folks. This is the enlightened centrist thing, right? Which I'm not saying ContraPoints is a centrist. My standpoint, she's a center-left liberal. That seems to be what she says, and it seems to be her perception of things. It's this thing where you assume, because you're not taking these radical positions, that you are more grounded in reality. But we say these things because we are looking at the reality and pointing it out as socialists, right? As socialists, we are seeing the facts of global inequality, and we are saying this doesn't change until this changes. That's just the reality. And people look at us and they say they're unreasonable. They don't know what they're talking about. Is ContraPoints canceled? That's not a thing. Nobody gets canceled anymore. Diddy didn't even get, like, you guys, there's no canceling. Just because your position seems wise, seems nuanced, and seems to thread a nice delicate line between what's true, between one side and the other, between radical and not too radical, just because you're threading that delicate line and saying things to sound grounded and sound reasonable does not mean you are actually being reasonable. It does not mean you are actually based in the facts. Okay? It would have required replacing most of Congress and overturning decades of bipartisan strategy and diplomacy. Even in the best case scenario, it would have taken years. So there was a sense of futility, but worse. So that's just, yeah, again, it's not a thoughtful reflection on what was being asked, because what was being asked was a ceasefire and an arms embargo. What is a ceasefire? You see how quickly the United States is willing to do ceasefires, or at least proclaim ceasefires in Iran. We've seen there have been several ceasefires that have happened between Israel and Palestine, of course, which have never been fully respected by the IDF. But a declaration of a ceasefire was what was asked for by the vast majority of people. Liberals, leftists, even centrists, even some right-wingers. Perfectly normal thing. Happens all the time, literally all the time. So that's not something that takes years. It can happen very quickly, and it's a very normal part of the process. It is abnormal how long this has taken and how long this has gone on. It is abnormal how long this has gone on. And in addition, arms embargo. Stop using our taxpayer money to send immediate military aid to Israel. That's the demand. That's the arms embargo. We are not selling you arms anymore because you are going against international law. You are going against our orders because we are declaring a ceasefire. Very simple 1-2 punch, could have been handled in a couple of weeks. If you study geopolitics, if you study how US presidents have handled foreign policy before, you will know that this is a normal thing that happens even in the most unreasonable administration. So why is ContraPoints saying that asking Israel to simply stop committing the most heinous genocide imaginable, save for the many other ones, of course, because we're not going to do comparisons, that's another thing we can touch on. Why is ContraPoints saying this thing's going to take years? It's totally futile, because ContraPoints doesn't want to do anything about it. ContraPoints does not want to yell at her officials. ContraPoints does not want to be out here looking like some sort of radical. ContraPoints wants to look like the reasonable person, wants to go about her day. She feels doom, and because she feels doom and she centers her doom, she doesn't challenge her doom, she feels that the only reasonable way to live is to accept that things are bad and not going to change, even though that is actually unreasonable, even though it is actually also morally quite bankrupt, okay? And again, this is not me saying ContraPoints loves genocide, hates Arabs, okay? I'm sure she has Arab friends, you know? But let's just call a spade, right? Worse 2, misery. The leftist pro-Palestine movement quickly decided that their primary goal was not merely opposition to the genocide, but opposition to Zionism in general. That is, opposition to the existence of Israel as a Jewish state. And here they decided to draw the line separating decent people from genocidal fascists. So let's break this down, because it's at first the reasonable position that a lot of people have espoused, the nuanced position. Oppose the genocide, sure, but that does not mean opposing Zionism. There are many Zionists who are nice people. There are many nice Israelis, right? First of all, there are many nice Israelis. I met one. I met a nice Israeli. She was a teenager, and she went to prison because she refused to serve in the IDF and then fled. Very nice person. just gonna leave that there. Second of all, Zionism is a very large category, it is true, but why is this an unreasonable expectation? You know, opposition to the existence of Israel as a Jewish state. Do you understand what this means? right? What if this was saying opposition to the existence of the United States as a Christian state, right? What if that was what this was saying, right? Opposition to the existence of India as a Hindu state. What does that imply? That implies that if this is the unreasonable position, which includes hating on a lot of decent people, that opposing apartheid and a religious ethno state is immoral. That's the suggestion. That's the suggestion. That's the suggestion. We do not support, liberals don't do this, okay? Ta-Nehisi Coates, like, Mehdi Hassan, regular liberals who are right in the same corner of ideology, if you really look at it in that like dreg way, where it's like that sarcastic dreg way, where it's like, this is where a leftist is, this is where a liberal is, this is where people who think like you are like, this is apartheid, this is an ethno state, this is a religious state, right? This is a state that is not secular. Liberalism is literally like, without secularism, what is liberalism, right? So if you are liberal, as you espouse yourself to be, ContraPoints, you should be opposed to any state existing as a specific religious state in terms of your viewpoint, right? You should not view that as good. And so if you don't view that as good, you should not be mad that other people are outwardly doing activism against that. That should not upset you. Also, mods, do your thing in the chat. If anybody says anything anti-Semitic, if anybody says anything wild or transphobic or homophobic, do your thing. Here they decided to draw the line separating decent people from genocidal fascists, which had the following consequences. 1, it shrunk the coalition. Zionist is a very broad category. Most Jews are Zionists. Anyone who supports a two-state solution is a Zionist. Okay, so yes, Zionist is a very broad category, especially historically. But right now, Zionist is not that broad of a category. Second of all, most Jews are Zionists. I'm sorry, I don't think that that's true. I think even if that were the case, why look at the raw numbers of something and be like, oh, 51% are Zionists, instead of saying like, and that's my silly voice, just to let y'all know. When I say something is silly, it's this is a random silly person, and this is how they talk. Oh, most Jews are Zionists, right? I just want to give y'all the context for that. Even if that's the case, what about all of these anti-Zionist Jews who, for instance, in the most Jewish city in the United States, New York City, voted in a Democratic primary for a candidate who is firmly against the genocide and against apartheid in Israel and has done anti-Zionist campaigning, like anti-Zionist activism? Why not emphasize, even if it is 30% of Jewish people, why not look at them and say, hey, the existence of this 30% of Jewish people is really important, should be prioritized, because they are, according to my viewpoint as a liberal, not even as a socialist, as a liberal, they are factually correct about this. Why emphasize, hey, most Jews are Zionists, right? Hey, most white people are Republicans. I don't get it. Why does that matter? Okay, well, we're talking about building and alienating bases. That's why that's why it matters to ContraPoints. 2, it was politically infeasible. What is the pathway that takes us from the present situation to the dissolution of Israel as a Jewish state? I don't see how this could happen without either a total internal collapse of Israeli society or else, nuclear war. As usual, leftists have championed a doomed cause. So you are the one who is experiencing doom. That is the thing that you feel. That does not mean other people are supporting a doomed cause. It means that you feel doom about their cause. Examine why you might feel that way. That said, okay, it was politically infeasible. How do we get to the dissolution of Israel as a Jewish state? Well, we can't personally do anything, really. I can't do anything about global poverty, so I might as well not do anything about it. I can't do anything about, racism against black people. How am I going to stop the police? Well, it's infeasible to stop the police from being a white supremacist organization. It's infeasible to stop systemic racism. So why should I do anything about it? It's infeasible. Let's go here. This is the first time, maybe the last time I go here. It is infeasible to expect the Nazis to be pro-Jew, to stop exterminating Jewish people. So why should I risk my political coalition and its broadening to support such a cause that is so politically infeasible? Second of all, they thought Vietnam was a doomed cause too, says Colormine in the chat. Reasonable point. A lot of the times, and this goes back to my previous point, a lot of the times you guys think things are doomed. I'm talking about more than one person now. Folks think things are just so doomed and so wild until they just happen, and then everybody goes, well, yeah, but it's not quite what it... No, accept that political change happens. That's part of it. Cuban Revolution was a doomed cause. Like everything, like Chinese Revolution was a doomed cause. Zora Mamdani winning the primary was a doomed cause. Vietnam is a small country. How is it going to defend itself against the biggest military in the world? What a doomed cause. They should just give over to capitalism. I'm sorry. Not only does that logic not make sense, because we should do things reasonably if we're thinking strategically to part by part help in changing political situations. But two, a lot of you think certain things are doomed and they really are not. Again, like if somebody like Ronald Reagan and George W. Bush could be like, yo, I'm not sending military aid to Israel right now. You guys need to lay low. This Sabra and Shatila massacre, this is ridiculous. We're not... Like, if Ronald Reagan can do that, how is it an unreasonable demand to ask a politician supposedly to his left to do that? Right? It introduced dangerous ambiguities. The vagueness of Zionism as a political Satan enables all kinds of rhetorical abuses. On the one hand, right-wing Israelis hold up all anti-Zionist protests as existentially threatening and inherently anti-Semitic. On the other hand, there is a long history of anti-Semites using the term Zionist in deliberately equivocal ways. Anti-Semites are happy for the opportunity to misappropriate the now popular anti-Zionist label to legitimize their agenda, and many people are not informed enough about anti-Semitism to recognize when this is happening. These problems are mutually reinforcing. Again, it's like, okay, so first of all, well, like if you support this, it kind of looks like you're supporting this other bad thing. So, you got to be careful just like how you support it. Like you got to just be careful not to say those things, because what if people think you're saying this other thing? If I say, white feminism is ultimately still upholding white supremacy, and I'm speaking on behalf of my black women and femme friends, my brown women and femme friends, Asian women and femme friends, and that's close to me saying like I'm against feminism in the United States because a lot of feminists are white feminists, and so is that really something that should be worth saying? This is the same kind of logic that was used against the Combahee River Collective, right? Don't do this intersectional feminism thing. You're gonna take down the overall cause, because there's a lot of white feminists, and yes, they're not perfect, but they should be part of your coalition to build things. Coalition building is action-based, it's issue-based. Coalition building is not, I have certain opinions and I want to push the intellectual space in a certain direction. You don't build a coalition from that. You alienate people sometimes, but you push. Perfect. I cite this all the time. This is the last citation, thing I'll mention before going on. And multiple videos now, I have mentioned to my audience and cited the statistics that the Black civil rights movement in the United States was widely unpopular among white people. It was widely unpopular among white people. It was something like 30% of white people agreed with the nonviolence, even direct action that black activists were doing in the American South and throughout the United States. They thought it was unreasonable. They thought, if you want us to understand you and to help your demands, you should stop alienating us. You know, doing this stuff, we don't like it. So why are you doing it? Obviously, you're not helping your cause. You're not helping your cause. That is what white people said. And then it worked. Why? Because it put actual direct pressure on institutions and it shaped discourse. Sometimes you have to be unpopular for a while. This is actually basically every political movement ever. It starts off as quite unpopular, but because it pushes people and because it puts material pressure on political economy, it changes the landscape. I feel like Jon Stewart has even more of a leftist, like a left-wing position on Israel than ContraPoints does. 3, dread. The online left has spent the last 20 months distributing hundreds of photos and videos of dead Palestinian children. Okay, so what is this, right? Because these are not things that we're just like finding and printing out in the local library and just passing them out on the street, right? And many leftists are sharing these things, but you know who's really sharing these things? Palestinians. You know where we're getting this imagery from? Palestine. Are you so like what's the problem with us sharing things that Palestinian victims of genocide are saying, please share this with people? You know, the main effect of this has been to create a population of people in a constant state of blood boiling rage with no consequential political outlet. We will examine how true this is in a bit. I fear this may be worse than useless. Anti-Semitism and Anti-Zionism are conceptually not the same, and conflating them is dangerous, but in practice, the way Israel is perceived does seep out into attitudes toward Jews in general. I don't think Jews who feel isolated and wary in the current atmosphere are simply hysterical or hallucinating. Sure. Yes, there's communal trauma and hypervigilance. Yes, there's disingenuous right-wing ghouls dismissing and censoring all criticism of Israel on the pretext of fighting anti-Semitism, but there's also a valid fear of historical anti-Semitic patterns recurring, and that fear gives power to the right-wing Zionist claim that only Israel can keep Jews safe. Does this mean Israel should not be criticized and sanctioned? Absolutely not, but it's something I don't want to risk contributing to, if not outweighed by tangible benefits, so I approach the issue cautiously. Let's take a deep breath. I don't again, like with the stuff that I've cited to you before, right? Like, this is something that has happened in every political historical movement. Who did write this? Just a Contra defender? This is ContraPoints herself. In the French Revolution, I'm not even going to get into who died in the French Revolution. Haitian Revolution, a lot of, innocent white French settlers were killed. Okay. Black Lives Matter movement did bring some hostilities towards white people. And that only further entrenched, let's use this logic, the civil rights movement only further entrenched the right wing, because all the white people who were alienated and isolated by the civil rights movement, by these people who they considered to be these uppity, angry blacks, the civil rights movement then just allowed for there to be much more power in the hands of the right wing, who could now feasibly more prove to white people that yes, we are representing you and your interests. So if you think about it, the civil rights movement really only empowered Strom Thurmond and George Wallace and segregationists more. What sense does that make? What sense does that make? Right? And people, when you do this, people love to go, well, this example is different, this example is different. I just don't understand how, if you're in this position, you don't just look at, like, we're not asking you to be Che Guevara. You don't just look at, like, okay, I feel nervous about making my act, because I've done this. I feel nervous about my activism bleeding into contributing to anti-Semitic messaging, anti-Semitic political movements. I feel nervous about that, so this is what I do if I feel that way. I'm going to share what Jewish Voice for Peace shared, right? Liberal Jewish organization that is against apartheid in Palestine. I'm just going to share what they said. I'm going to share the work of Ilan Pappé, Israeli historian who is, resoundingly essentially anti-Israel, anti-apartheid, right? I'm going to share their work. I'm going to share Gabor Mate and his thoughts, Jewish survivor of the Holocaust, who is now, famous psychological thinker. So that way it's clear that I am empowering Jewish people and their voices and fighting for their peace and survival. And then also not empowering, and also just like fighting, resisting, opposing apartheid in Palestine. And there's so many versions of that, depending on where you are in the political spectrum. I don't share that much JVP stuff now because sometimes like their opinions I don't quite intersect with, but there are many other Jewish voices who I try to amplify. Ajay Singh Chaudhry, right? Let's talk about this. Why not just do that? It's not a hard line to thread. Oh, but it still might. You always could alienate the opposition. That is always a part of political work. That is always a part of political work, especially as somebody who is meaning to shape political discourse. Your job, again, is to alienate people, but ContraPoints is still stuck on this mentality like she's running a campaign. Which, ironically, like, again, New York City proves that you can run campaigns on ideas that seem far more divisive and still build a large majority. There's a degree to which, yeah, you can start saying, okay, look, this point, I get what you're trying to say. It's a little too radical. I think it's going to alienate more people than it will bring in. There's a balance to this, yes, but why is this the place that you've landed on, when you could instead just be focusing on advocating for people to do more against the genocide, advocating for BDS, advocating for Jewish anti-apartheid or apartheid organizations, if that's how you feel. And there's worthy critique of that too. I think certain people have highlighted how often people focus on emphasizing Jewish voices against the IDF and not focus on platforming the Palestinians who are the actual victims of genocide, right? It's a difficult balance, but that's life, right? That's life. Forget politics. That's just life. You strike balances. You don't get to say this balance is hard to strike. I'm just going to avoid it. Especially when you make the money you make, which again, we will get into it. Bitterness. We're almost done. Much of the online left spent all of 2024 single-mindedly focused on Palestine and the complicity of democratic politicians in sending aid to Israel. This campaign had the following effects. 1. 0 Palestinian lives were saved. Not one fewer bomb or bullet was fired by the IDF. I don't think this is true because, for instance, think about the vast amount of fundraising campaigns that have tangibly helped, even as much as aid is blockaded in Israel, that have tangibly helped Palestinians, that have gained so much support as a result of this activism. So saying 0 Palestinian lives were saved, again, like, this is not true. Think about how much fundraising was done for the UNRWA just in Noah Samson's stream alone. But second of all, even if it was true, you're going to blame people for speaking out against things that are actually wrong because it wasn't effective enough, instead of just like offering better ways to do it. Like, does something have to be done or not? Does something have to be done or not? So even if you believe this to be true against reason, it might have slightly contributed to the re-election of Trump, guaranteeing that the U.S. will put no diplomatic pressure on Netanyahu for at least 4 years, and making protests against Israel both much riskier and less effective. This is like a contradiction that reflects that you don't understand protests very well, because protests being risky reflects their effectiveness. That is just a truth of like looking back historically. Like when the state is at a point of saying we need to send in force to quell protests, this is a position of weakness that they are operating from, that usually is followed by some types of concessions. That is the historical precedent, frankly. Trump is also, incidentally, a menace to me and basically everyone I care about. A perfectly enlightened being would feel no bitterness about this, but I do. You don't need to be a perfectly enlightened being to see that placing blame on leftists for being activistic about apartheid and genocide in Palestine is not sensible. Placing blame on them for electing Trump is not sensible because they're not the ones running the campaign for the Democratic Party against Trump. They're just focused on, God forbid, may the Lord forgive them, they're just focused on trying to help Palestinian people. You know who you should be blaming? Joe Biden for continuously running for a re-election campaign well into the apparent reality that he was not a popular candidate at all and was going to lose, and then tanking the Democratic campaign by, and the reporting on this is here, guys, back me up, find it, you can find it, going against even the flaccid, terrible politically thinking Democratic Party and their wishes, including those of Barack Obama's, to run a flash primary for the Democratic Party's nomination for president. He went against those wishes and instead immediately endorsed Kamala Harris. He fucked off his own party. His internal polling was disastrous, and he still kept running his campaign. And then when it was clear he was going to be forced out of running his campaign, out of bitterness, he nominates his vice president, Kamala Harris, and then continuously pressures Kamala Harris throughout the campaign to assert that she would be no different from Joe Biden, despite how unpopular he was, despite having the polling numbers. How do you not say, hey, you know what, these leftists, maybe I feel like they could have done a little bit more to reasonably toe the line between endorsing genocide and pushing for Kamala Harris to get elected because she would be slightly better than Trump is. And I read slightly. She ran to the right of Trump on the border. She did not stand up for trans lives at all in her campaign. She was a very poor political communicator with bad ideas. Terrible recipe for running a presidency. On top of the fact that, yes, America is a racist and sexist country. Okay? You didn't give her any chance to make an account of herself to the American people like someone like Barack Obama did for years before getting the nomination from the Democratic Party. You saw what she was up against and you just nominated her. Complete disaster. How do you not blame the party that is actually trying to run against Donald Trump? That's their job, is to stop Donald Trump from getting elected. And that's all they've ever talked about, is opposing Donald Trump. And they did a terrible job objectively. And you're going to be like, well, it's because these leftists online pushed people to care more about Palestine. So now I got to deal with Trump. Oh no, right? And we're going to talk about this a little bit more. We're going to get, because it's real, okay? None of this is the fault of the Palestinians, of course, who are overwhelmingly the victims here. Well, thank you for saying that, Contra. Thank you so much for saying that. I hope someday that American policy will shift in their favor, and I will continue to support that cause. How are you supporting it? You have actively said in this post that you are avoiding engaging with activism that pushes people to support their cause because you think it's too divisive, and now you're saying you're continuing to support that cause. But that's the thing, for a lot of white people, sorry, I didn't even show the thing. For a lot of white people and for a lot of liberals, and it's not exclusive to white people, but for a lot of people, just thinking something is equivalent to acting on its behalf. Just thinking, I think it's bad that genocide is happening, is opposing genocide. Just thinking, I support the Palestinians, is supporting Palestinians. And not, hey, you know what? I have a massive platform and a lot of resources. I could do a lot of work to funnel humanitarian aid towards Palestine. It's strange. TLDR, I see the situation as bleak, intractable, extremely divisive, and devoid of any element that could be appropriately transformed into political entertainment. That's why I haven't made a video about it. Hopefully it goes without saying that these are just my thoughts. I'm sure other breadtubers have different opinions. And we'll talk about breadtube in general, because the Cavernacle made a video recently a day ago talking about ContraPoints in the recent controversy, as well as mentioning PhilosophyTube and H-Bomber Guy. This is like the holy trinity of Breadtube, apparently, to people. I remember them very fondly in their content growing up. I keep saying growing up. I was in college. Okay, I was in my early 20s. And I love their content. I used to love their content. I've actually also, and you know what? I just want to give y'all the reference for this, right? Because I think it's actually kind of helpful for you guys to understand the position that I'm coming from really quickly. Like, when I started my my journalism career, because I used to be a journalist before I did YouTube, my first ever piece was an interview with ContraPoints. I didn't pick this headline. This trans YouTuber star is destroying the alt-right. I didn't pick this either, okay? So just in case you guys think it's cringe. I interviewed her, and she was very nice on the phone. She was very nice on the phone. She has a very nice interview. I also interviewed PhilosophyTube. I interviewed her. She was very nice. She was very nice. And I looked up to them. But two things have happened. One, my politics have changed. I've grown. And so my politics drifted farther left than they were. But they also drifted further centrist. And they did so out of a strict kind of economic and political opportunism. I have to say that. I have to call it for what it is, because people will say, and I have a tendency to say things like, well, I'm sure that they mean well. I'm sure that ContraPoints means well. Part of it is I'm trying not to do dogpiling, okay? I know that the internet can be really mean and over the top, ridiculous in how it does critique. I'm trying to see people's humanity. But what I think, and this is something that my partner Nelly, who has a great channel, and we'll talk about that in a second, pointed out to me last night. She said, these people do not mean well. They think they mean well. Maybe they're trying to mean well, but that does not mean that they mean well. And what you see in ContraPoints' opinion is a reflection of that. She thinks she means well. She's a nice person in many instances. She has done good work in many instances. Okay, she's done some good videos. But she is fundamentally explaining to us her intentionality and her feelings. She is fundamentally explaining to us that her intention is to be very careful about talking about genocide, funding humanitarian aid towards victims of genocide, educating herself further on genocide, because she does not want to divide well-meaning Zionists, because she does not want to divide Zionists from her audience. She does not want to alienate certain people. Why doesn't she want to alienate certain people? What good intention could that be based in? What good intention could that be based in? Does alienating certain people mean, is that so difficult because I want everybody to like me? Well, that's not moral. That's not ethical. Just because you want people to like you and your platform does not mean that you get to just do whatever you want. Like, you just get to avoid doing certain principled things because you don't want to isolate them. That's not a valid reason not to want that. Sure. Are you worried about backlash? Well, what kind of backlash? Financial backlash? I can tell you right now, we'll get into it. The finances are not something that you should be worried about. The finances are not something that you should be worried about. What is it you're worried about? That is not a good intention. That is not meaning well. If your intentions are good and you mean well, even if you feel these things, which many of us have felt these things at different points and then talked to ourselves and told ourselves, you know what, this is not reasonable. But so feeling these things can allow you to just see, okay, well, this is how I'm going to support the Palestinians. Since I support the Palestinians, this is what I'm going to do. And someone like H-Bomber Guy and PhilosophyTube, PhilosophyTube, I'm not going to get into a very detailed conversation about her. We've spent a lot of time talking about ContraPoints at this point. Again, she was very nice to me when I talked to her. She's done some good work, but I don't think she means well, because to do so little to no activism with your platform to at least funnel significant humanitarian aid to Palestine for fear of, like, we can connect the dots. We see you're on Game of Thrones. We see you have an acting career now. You're trying to make movies. We see that you don't want to alienate people. There's a lot of actors and directors, by the way, that have way bigger careers than you in that field, and they're making those sacrifices. And also a lot more vulnerable and smaller careers than you, and are making those sacrifices. And let's just say it. Why are you afraid of alienating people? Is it because you fear lacking support? Right? Is it because you fear a lack of financial support? Like, when people talk about, I'm trying to, you know, I have an acting career, I need to make sure I pay the bills. You know, that's what they're talking about. They're talking about paying the bills. They're talking about feeding their family, feeding themselves. Let's get into it. Let's get into it really quickly. Let's go on ContraPoints' Patreon. ContraPoints. Okay. These are the tiers on ContraPoints' Patreon. $2 to be a commendable non-freeloader. $5 a month to be a mysterious benefactor. $10 a month to be a distinguished enabler. $15 a month to be an outright accomplice. $20 a month to be a full co-conspirator. Okay? Do you want to guess how many members she has? And we're going to distinguish two, because a lot of these are not going to be paid. I will say maybe a quarter of these are going to be paid members. Maybe a quarter of these are going to be paid members, because that's usually the ratio. So a lot of times it's half, but we'll say a quarter of these are going to be paid members. Do you want to know how many members she has? 53,567 members. Do you like doing mental math? Let's say a fifth of these are paid members. A fifth. And let's say each of those paid members only pay $2 a month. 10,000 people pay $2 a month. That's the smallest estimate I can make of your Patreon. That is $20,000 a month. Is the absolute bottom guess of reasonability. In reality, many of them are going to be $5 a month. Many of them are going to be $10 a month. Many are going to be $15 a month, $20 a month. Okay? If you have 100 people who pay you $20 a month, out of those members, that is $2,000 a month. I make a fifth of that on Patreon. Why is it that I can do more activism for fucking Palestine than you can? And I'm not an activist. I'm not an organizer. I'm not good at these things particularly. We'll get into it. So it's, in reality, it could be more like $50,000 a month, because it's probably not a fifth of these members. It's probably like 20,000 members are paid. And it's probably that like 5,000 of them are in the $5 a month, and 3,000 of them are in the $15 a month or the $20 a month. So we're probably looking at $40,000 or $50,000 a month off of Patreon alone. Let me explain to you how Patreon works. It is people giving you money so you can do your work. It is just people crowdfunding for you. That's not salary. That's not a paycheck from a paid salaried job. That is not YouTube AdSense revenue from videos that you've put out, which you make a lot of that too. That is not sponsorships, which many of us have to take. And by the way, some of these folks who make a lot on Patreon will then talk about how bad it is that people take sponsorships. Spare me, okay? Pay my bills then if you think it's so immoral, right? That's none of that. That's just strictly, we're talking about people giving you around $30,000, $40,000 a month. Do you know what $40,000 a month is per year? What's 4 times 12? 48. What's 10,000? Shit, I fucked up. 48 times 12, 40,000 times 12 would be $480,000 a month. Is that correct? Check my math. Is that $480,000 a month that I just calculated? Is that what that would be off of Patreon alone? She has 2,300 paid members. 2,300? I don't think that would be really strange. She has 28,000 paid members. I'm sorry, it's not showing it on the thing. She has 28,000 paid members. That means at bare minimum, $56,000 a month. At bare minimum. More likely, people are in many different tiers. You're talking about $70,000 a month, $80,000 a month. ContraPoints makes close to $1 million a year off of Patreon alone. I'm gonna let you sit with that. ContraPoints is a millionaire telling you that she is too afraid that you silly people who make 30,000 a year, 50,000 a year, 60,000 a year, you silly rabbles, you uneducated people, putting all of your effort and energy into doing activism and humanitarian work for Palestine, you silly people, that's too divisive. I dare not divide my audience. Because what if instead of making $70,000 a month on Patreon, I make $40,000, $50,000, $30,000? By the way, she's had this Patreon for like 5-6 years. It is not unreasonable to suggest that she has had over the past 5-6 years has made it like over like $3 million. So what are you afraid of? This is what I'm trying to emphasize, right? Because we're against billionaires existing. We're fine with millionaires existing. People, there's obviously a very wide range of multimillionaires. Somebody who has $3 million a year off of making content, salute. That's the dream, okay? That's not an unreasonable amount of money. Most of it is from people just giving you their money because they like your stuff. That's how the world should work, right? But then what are you afraid of? Are you afraid of alienating the industry? Why? You don't get paid by the industry. You get paid by regular people. Are you afraid of alienating your audience? You will not lose that many people. You're kind of dragging this point about her income like it's no different from stalking, and it's so fucking weird. So Candace, I'm going to explain to you why I'm emphasizing her income. Because there are several different campaigns that have happened throughout the past couple of years that have been raising humanitarian funding for Palestine, and I haven't seen ContraPoints participate in them. And I want you to fact check me on this because, I'm willing to embarrass myself on this. I did Creators for Palestine a couple of times. I don't make that much, okay? What ContraPoints makes in a month, I might not make in a year, okay? But I still make enough money to take care of myself. So with that privilege, I'm sitting here like, hey, why don't I do a live stream fundraiser for Sudan? Why don't I participate in this easy Creators for Palestine thing? This easy Creators for Palestine, all they asked me was like, hey, we're getting all these creators together with a message. We want you to post it on your community posts and your Instagram. Nothing about, hey, do you support Hamas? Like, nothing about like resistance and like very simple, like we're raising money for humanitarian aid towards a genocide. All things that you have stated in your own opinions are things you back, things you support. Why weren't you there? I don't make videos that are solely focused on Palestine, okay? She starts off the video, leftists want me to make a video about Palestine. I haven't seen it to be the right thing to do. Okay. So I haven't made any videos that are specifically about Palestine. You can check my channel. I've made several videos that talk about Palestine in different capacities. Okay? My nuance video, most recent video, You saw it towards the end. You saw that the conclusion talks about how nuanced traps are used to be unproductive in discourse about Palestine. And I also fundraised for a family, for two families, who I have reason to believe are in Gaza, and it showed me some proof. There are other videos. Greta Thunberg, that's pretty self-explanatory, talking about her activism in Palestine and how it relates to climate change. So if I want to talk about climate change, I can talk about climate change. If I want to talk about the UN, I can talk about the UN. If I want to talk about the history of Japanese fascism, I can talk about them and have sections in my videos that are like, hey, you see how this connects to Palestine? So I just don't understand how people can do this work and not be able to feed themselves off of it and have to take part-time jobs and still be like, hey, like I have a good position. I should use my platform to elevate this fundraiser, to do this live stream. Like, let me tell you something, because H-Bomber Guy is not the focus today. Maybe he will be the focus another day. H-Bomber Guy has been pretty back and forth about this because he'll tweet certain things that are pro-Palestine and against the IDF. And then apparently he's deleted those tweets. When the situation first happened, when October 7th first happened, within the first couple of months, he made this post saying he doesn't feel qualified to speak about it because it's complicated. That was not cool. And you've seen, like in the time since, has H-Bomber Guy dropped a video about Gaza? No. Did H-Bomber Guy participate in the Creators for Palestine thing? To my knowledge, no. To my knowledge, no. Again, you can back me up and I will retract my statement. To my knowledge, H-Bomber Guy has not even participated in the thing that is literally just sign your name onto this and then we'll post it on different places. Curtis Connor did it. I'm sorry for yelling. My microphone is probably clipping a lot. Curtis Connor is doing this stuff and you're not, H-Bomber Guy? Like, I know you're not a political YouTuber. Curtis Connor can do that and you can't, right? But this is why I bring H-Bomber Guy up. One of the main reasons that I was really emboldened to do this YouTube video essay work and be like, this could be my career and I can help people doing this, right? Is because I saw H-Bomber Guy doing the mermaid stream. Do you remember that? Do you remember that he very nobly, very commendably did a live stream where he played video games for multiple days in a row, let the stream on for as long as possible, and raised tons of money for a trans organization, an organization to protect trans people in the UK. Do you remember that? That was one of the things that was like, this is really cool. I should do stuff like this. So I tried. I've done fundraising live streams, right? Again, say you're not interested in having arguments about Zionism. Say that you're not interested or you feel weary about supporting some of the more left-wing viewership, the more left-wing arguments about Palestine. You're not aligned with the takes of the Marxist-Leninist Party of Palestine. Say that that's the case. What could be so controversial about doing a humanitarian aid live stream? Doing multiple. What could be the case? What could be so alienating about that? And do you want to talk about, okay, H-Bomber Guy, Patreon? Since we're gonna keep stalking people then, I guess, if that's what you guys want to say that I'm doing. H-Bomber Guy. Here are your tiers on Patreon. $2 a month, $5 a month, $10 a month. H-Bomber Guy. Here are the amount of paid members that H-Bomber Guy has. Amount of people that are giving him at least $2 a month. 21,000. He is making at least $42,000 a month on Patreon. Who are you afraid to alienate? Who are you afraid to alienate by doing the stuff that Curtis Connor did? Curtis Connor can alienate people, but not you? You have done content multiple times, like you did live streams with AOC playing Donkey Kong 64 to raise money for trans people in the UK. You can't do one stream for 10 hours. You can't do one short video like Sean did. Sean did a video about Palestine. Some of these Breadtubers have done this work. A percentage of that money goes to Patreon fees. Yes, that's true. So maybe we're talking about like $35,000 a month. 30,000. I don't know exactly what the percentages look like at that. Do you want to look at the Philosophy Tube one? Because this is Philosophy Tube. And I promise we're going to get somewhere productive with this. But we got to get a little bit angry. Even if it's going to cost people calling me all types of names, saying that I'm ungrateful to these people who are very nice to me. It's going to cost people, you know, to say all types of things about like how I'm parasocial, I'm too parasocial while they defend content creators online. I'm the one who's too parasocial. My activism is fake, it's performative because I'm just focusing on content creators. I'm stalking people. I'm bag checking. I'm pocket checking people. Philosophy Tube. $2 a month. Patrons. $5 a month patrons. $20 a month patrons. $50 a month patrons. If you do this one, you can get an introductory philosophy book that she'll sign and mail to you with a special thank you card included. $125 a month, which includes a handwritten letter. Now, Philosophy Tubes is not as big. So if everybody does the minimum among her paid members and then just sends her $2 a month, that's about $10,000 a month. Now, it's going to be bigger because some of those people did 5 and 10 and 125 to get the thank you letter. So we're talking maybe $15,000 a month, $20,000 a month. Poverty. But I have to protect my acting career. You know? So I'm only going to mention Gaza in one part at the end of a video that's about how death changes us, to talk about how Gaza and also COVID and also climate change have shown people how death is. I'm just going to mention it like that. And I'll be a part of a podcast that does raise some money for Palestine. But will I use my platform to bring a lot of attention toward, you know, to Rashid Khalidi, the 10,000 years, the 1,000 years war on Palestine, the 100 years war on Palestine. Sorry, I'm messing up a lot right now. I'm getting a little tired. I'm a purity tester, yeah. Yeah, FD Signifier has been vocal in support of Palestine in multiple ways and has stated for the record, hey, the reason I'm not doing specific like video essays talking about Palestine is because I do feel like it's not my strength, but I'm going to share with you. How many times has FD Signifier shared small channels that cover all these different issues? Shared Dr. Fatima's post close to October 7th talking about what happened when many other Breadtubers were too scared to do that. I remember that. So these folks, even if they want to mean well, they mean to mean well, they don't mean well. And it hurts me to say that because I really looked up to these people. I had good interactions with a couple of them. There are certain creators, okay, that maybe they make $8,000 a month, a meager $8,000 or $5,000 a month on Patreon. Do you understand how life-changing that money is for most of us? Chat, really quickly, to demonstrate like how much this money is to all these creators. Give me a quick rundown. How much money do you make a year? Chat. You know, tell me where you're from, how much money you make a year. You know, let's start there. And yeah, no, Nebula is where a lot of these creators are, but there are a lot of great creators on Nebula too who are very pro-Palestine. So yeah, I'm waiting for the thing to come in. Folks, let me know. Mars, 30K. 0, I'm unemployed. 10K a year. 50K with me and my wife together from Oklahoma. 0, 50K-ish with taxes. I'm doing my master's. I make 4K a month as a postdoc. 2K off of summer jobs. About 10K. 20K in rural California. Less than 30K. Less than 30,000 euros. Less than 26,000 pounds in England. 13K in Croatia. On financial aid as a grad student in Atlanta. Sorry for the slurp noise. What Contra makes in a year is roughly $30 million in my currency. 4K a year, but I'm Venezuelan. Not even minimum wage at the moment. In dollars, 10K. 6K a year, I'm presuming. 9K USD in Brazil. 39,000 Indiana. I work for the state. That's a pretty good job. 80K in Australia. Okay. You have people who are, so to demonstrate, you have people who are making 80K a year, 100K a year. We're not even talking about the Contra and H-bomb side anymore. On Patreon. Just off of people giving money to them. And they're like, I don't know, this Palestine stuff is very divisive. I don't know if I should speak about it. And also, they talk about politics. I just don't understand this. This is not acceptable anymore. This is not acceptable anymore. So for reference, I make around 50K a year, although a lot of that goes to expenses to help make the videos because I pay my editors. I can't afford to rent. I'm saving up to try to get my own place. That's where we're at. I make $400 a month on Patreon. And I don't want you to see me as the victim here. What I'm going to do at this last part of this stream is I'm going to direct your attention to people who you should be giving your money to instead of ContraPoints, instead of H-bomb and PhilosophyTube. Just in case there are some of you in here that give them your money, even if you like them, they don't need it. And they haven't proven that they're going to stand on business about certain things in order to legitimize like that audience, in order to actually make use of the resources they're being given. But even if you don't agree with me, even if you disagree with everything that I've said, you can agree objectively that somebody who makes hundreds of thousands of dollars in a couple of years off of Patreon does not need everybody to give them $2. And you could be giving your $2 to other people. So here, I'm going to give you some examples. Great channels that are trying their best. Noir has been fundraising to help continue to do their work. Okay, Noir. Afro-realist, video dissertationist, angry academic, philosophical work. And oh, look, content about genocide. 36,000 subscribers. One day, everyone will always have been against this. In Denial. In Denial just reached 100K on YouTube. Drag Therapy, Palestinian Lebanese content creator living in Amsterdam. Makes a lot of content about genocide. Eurovision in Israel. Okay? A lot of people are shouting out great creators in the chat. I have more. I'm gonna go on for this for like a couple of minutes if you want to skip ahead in the VOD. Lost Futures. 8,000 subscribers. Keep eyes on Sudan. The myth of a liberal Zionism. This is what people are doing. This is what people are doing. While somebody like ContraPoints is like, I don't know, it just seems divisive to me. And by the way, I'll get back to this in a second. I didn't properly touch on actually also debunking some of these points. A couple of people on Twitter have done that work quite well. So this work that the leftists are doing, it doesn't make a change. It's not making a change. It's not doing anything. Who do Democrats sympathize more with, Israelis or Palestinians? 2017, Israelis plus 13 points. Now, Palestinians plus 43 points. So, and this is on CNN. This is not some like, oh, this is breakthrough news. They're a very leftist news organization. You don't know where their numbers are coming from. This is CNN's numbers. This is CNN's numbers. Oh, but you're not shaping public opinion. You're only alienating more and more people to our cause. No. We are bringing more people to our cause. But what kind of political gains can you make, right? What kind of political gains can you actually make? What kind of change can this actually bring about? What kind of change can this actually bring about when you act this way? What kind of change can this actually bring about? You know, what policy, how are you going to build political power doing these kinds of things, right? How are you going to build political power being like alienating people more and more? How are you going to build political power alienating people more and more? This is a really low res image. Europeans, you know who this is. How you're going to alienate people to your cause? You're going to alienate people to your cause. I just don't understand it. You know, do y'all know what's happening in Brazil? Do you know about the Landless Workers Party in Brazil? Do y'all see how much more radical people can be and still shift the discourse? Because that's what you're doing. When you're running a campaign like Zoran Mamdani, yeah, you're going to build majorities by making certain concessions, tamping down some of your views a little bit, and then working on building them a little bit more left-leaning over time, perhaps, if there is success to them. That's obviously also something we have to hold someone like Zoran Mamdani accountable to. But just like, the evidence is not with these people. I want you to understand that, right? If you're a leftist, and you're so used to hearing from liberals, from Democrat supporters, from centrists, oh, you people with your outlandish, outrageous views, you might be correct. You might be morally worthy or morally commendable, but your purity politics and your loudness, your volume, your aggression, your invocation of violence, these things alienate people. They alienate people. They're not going to build any coalitions. They're not going to cause any political change to happen. That is not true. If you are a leftist, I want you to understand that is not true. Now, that does not mean that you need to be online and alienating every last person who doesn't agree with your particular leftist tendency. It does not mean that there are not ways that you have to build coalitions by being in touch with people that you don't like. It does not mean that your thinking doesn't need to continuously be forged through study and real life experience and participating in political movements. Right? It doesn't mean that. You have a lot of work to do. I have a lot of work to do. But if we can do this, and we can see how much it's actually tangibly changing, then it's time that we acknowledge that these folks who we conceive to be on the left but are well-meaning but just don't quite support, they're not relevant anymore. They need to either change or they need to step away. Prince Shakur, you know, like, let's get back to that. Prince Shakur. Prince Shakur, I'm sub to Prince Shakur on my other channel, on my other channel, but let me sub to him here. What we can learn from LA's fight against ICE, how to protest, what to do if you can't protest, organizing beyond the front lines. Sorry. Lucretia McEvil. Let me pull up Lucretia's page as well. Lucretia McEvil could use your donations. Lucretia McEvil has a Patreon. You're talking about somebody who makes videos about punk, fashion or resistance, who makes videos about black histories of punk, videos about Lucy Parsons, helping people learn to organize, giving people the history on things, right? $71 a month. And you know what? I know Lucretia. Very kind person. Got a chance to hang out with them in New York when I was visiting. Very kind person. Very principled, noble, smart person. $71 a month is a help to them. It means a lot to them. Right? It's not enough. It's not enough. So this is a time period where you need to evaluate. If you are on Patreon and you have Patreon memberships as audience members, you need to evaluate, hey, does this guy really need my money? Does this person really need my money? Does this person really need my money? And in doing so, if you are giving money every month, especially to content creators who are really not sticking their neck out in any way to do activism for genocide ongoing in the Middle East and in Africa, despite being revered for their political views, this is a time for you to check that and go, I'm going to give my money to Lucretia McEvil instead. I'm going to give my money to Turb instead. I'm going to give my money to Colormind instead. Sim Kern. Andrewism. I mean, I feel like Andrewism is very COVID conscious, knowing him, but Andrewism, like, just pick. And what was mentioned about the landless workers movement by Lantino in the chat, who says MST has a bad reputation in the general public opinion, but it still achieves a lot of things. That actually is a perfect encapsulation of the point here. One last thing that I will leave you with, and then I'll give like a preamble conclusion and then go. I want you to look at Vincent Bevins' recent piece. Where is this thing? It was on The Nation. Here we go. I want you to read about the Brazilian landless workers movement, which led a principled front to grant critical support to Lula in order to expel the far-right Bolsonaro administration in Brazil, but focuses its attention and its organization on education and on reclaiming land through using the Brazilian legal reality, through using Brazilian law, occupying land and using it to help feed other people and to help give people a decent, dignified living. I just want you to read this, because every time we talk about leftism, we're always talking about the West. We're always talking about Marx, and we're always talking about ContraPoints, and we're always talking about breadtubers, and we're always talking about Zohar Mamdani, and we're always talking about Bernie Sanders, and we're talking about left politics here, and what do leftists do? What do leftists do? And it's always from the standpoint of what does the leftist guy from the West do in my local bakery? What does a leftist online that I see on Twitter who just tweets all day long from someplace in the US? Why, like, sorry, Candace distracted me because I don't know what Candace is talking about. Sorry, Candace. Maybe next time, man. No disrespect. I was talking about Brazil. Yeah, we talk about leftists, and we are constantly talking about global north. We're talking about the West. We're talking about people in the US. We're never talking about what's happening in Brazil. We're never talking about what's happening in Latin America. We're never talking about what's happening in the Middle East, in Africa. We're never talking about, Kenyan Gen Zers and their revolt against the Ruto administration and how many young Kenyans have been killed again in the anniversary of the protests. We're never talking about these things, right? We're constantly having these debates about, do I agree with you or do I disagree with you? Because if I agree with you, then we are both on the same side. But if I disagree with you, then we're not on the same side. And if we agree that we support something, then that means we support it because our opinion is that we think it's good. And if we disagree on something, but there's never any thought process about like, what are people materially doing? Nobody's asking you to be Che Guevara. Nobody's even asking you to be like running a local food not bombs. Okay? Do what you can. I have a lot of different life things that I have to prioritize. So I have to do what I can. There are a lot of things I should be doing that I haven't figured out how to fit into my schedule yet. But I'm trying. You know, and that's about it. And you can see what I've done, and you can sit there and say, okay, well, Elliot's not doing enough. I'm not asking you to give money to my Patreon specifically or to any of the creators I've named specifically if none of them fit your taste. But one thing we have to agree on now is that this Breadtube thing, where a bunch of, frankly, white content creators who are praised by large parasocial fandom audiences. Parasociality can be good. I'm not anti-parasociality, but very heavily defensive fandoms mobilize behind and call them the smartest people. They don't talk about politics that happen outside of their interests in media, and then they don't want to have strong stances about genocide. And we're a year and a half into one, and it's not okay anymore. It's never been okay, and it's simply not tolerable anymore. Burkina Faso, like we should be trying to figure out what journalism we can figure out we can reliably look at to see what's materially changing in Burkina Faso. Is the Marxist party in Burkina Faso that has held the reins for a couple of years under Traoré, are they opportunistic? What are they lying about? How much of the Russian support that they're receiving is going to compromise them? How much of it is necessary strategically? We can still look at it and be like, this is interesting. This is something we should study. This is something we should get behind to some degree. I think that's about all that I want to say. As you can see, this is a subject that has been very close to my heart and that I'm very passionate about. All I want to tell you as audiences is the shift is happening. Let's recognize it. This kind of thing, it's based in lies. These things that these folks are saying, they're not telling the truth. They're not aware of the truth, or they're lying about it. And they're making tons of money presenting themselves as the left, and that's not what they are. They're not revolutionary. They're not even very good at reform. They're not reformists. They don't have good politics. And frankly, they are financially opportunistic. And that is not a dog pile. That is not me making assertions based off of their personalities. That is simply reading what they say, what they do, versus what they get for who they claim to be. Yeah. Have a great day.